So, I saw Solo. Let's do this. Number 1, story bad. I'm gonna try to do a quick flyover of things that didn't make sense or felt dumb and just get this out of the way. Spoiler warning for everything. If I was the kind of alien where if sunlight hit me, it would burn my skin off, I don't think I would put my slime pool in a room with a lot of fragile glass windows and then just paint over the windows. I think I would put my slime pool room in some kind of interior room with no windows, or perhaps if it did have windows, I would reinforce them with something that couldn't be broken if a disgruntled person threw a rock through one, especially if I had a lot of enemies who would be safer if I was dead and whom I interrogate in the slime pool room. It literally makes no sense how Han got away from the guards in the spaceport. Like, the circumstances of them grabbing only Kira, who was an inch away from Han, and then the door closing between them, but somehow not hitting either of them, and Han standing there pounding on the gate and screaming, and the gate agent being like, somebody just got through the gate, and the guards all run to the gate where they can see and hear Han. They can see him because the door is transparent for some reason, and Han continuing to loudly pound and scream on the gate, and the guards on both sides of the gate looking at Han and running directly toward Han, and then Han just kind of casually walking to the side, evading both sets of guards by putting on a hat. Also, his loyalty to Kira is sweet, but I can't believe his goal 3 years after leaving is to get back to his home planet to find Kira. Not get out of the army and go out into space to find Kira, go back to his home planet and find Kira there. Why on earth would he think she would still be there after 3 years? She was getting hauled away and it kind of seemed like she was going to immediately be killed. She's either dead or she's moved on with her life. She is probably not hanging around in the spaceport. Were Tandy Newton and the little monkey alien exclusively added to reshoots? Because boy, it felt that way. I like how they both did nothing and died immediately. How thankless. The little alien guy was very starkly just some kind of Star Wars Rocket Raccoon, both in personality and physicality. The main difference being that Rocket Raccoon sometimes says funny jokes, and him being the comic relief, and the jarring tone of his immediate death was so weird and bad. It was almost comical how Tandy and the alien died after talking at length about how this was their last big job before retirement, and then Woody Harrelson talks about how the next job is his last big job before retirement, just without any sense of irony. It's so weird to set up this new team of 3 characters and then kill 66% of them in the next scene. When it cut to their little makeshift graves, I laughed out loud because it felt like a comedy smash cut. We're all a team, it's our last big job, smash cut to graves. I don't think Beckett would have even gotten their bodies. Maybe he could get the alien's body, but Tandy Newton exploded. So I would say the rock piles are purely symbolic. But why were they the approximate size and shape of their actual bodies then? And why this level of sentimentality from a man who's only out for himself and never mentions either of them again? I also think it's funny that Han and Chewie walk up right after the graves have been completed, because that must have taken some time. He built both of those rock piles, and then also snow fell on top of them. So they'd been there a while. Were Han and Chewie just waiting right over the ridge, waiting for him to be done so they didn't have to help? The Tandy Newton character, whose name is Val, she was actually even worse because not only did she not add anything, she actively undermined Beckett's only character trait, which is that he didn't trust anybody. Val's lack of impact was even clumsily addressed and then not resolved later in the movie. Beckett says not to trust anyone. Han, of course, immediately says, "You trusted Val," and then Beckett's just "I trust no one." But what? You just ignored what Han said. He said that you trusted Val, and you did. And that didn't at any point prove to be a mistake, so it's just a big gaping hole in his character development. I mean, maybe if Val had died in the act of betraying him, but it was actually the opposite. She killed herself because she saw the mission going south and she was trying to prevent all of the others from dying. It was an extremely selfless act, which proved her worthy of trust. So it's weird how Beckett just kind of breezes past that and it has no lasting impact on his character. He doesn't even stay sad for very long. I thought they were basically married. Why is Quinlan Voss's space yacht shaped like a tower? Like you would find on Earth? The reason things are shaped like towers on Earth is because you use less real estate. So like if you're in a city, you can just buy a little bit of land and put a lot of rooms on it, and they have nice views. If you're on a flying space yacht, you don't really need a lot of floors to have nice views. You could just fly in it forever, like you don't even need to park it anywhere. All the tower shape does is make it so that every floor has like limited square footage, which is not ideal if you want to entertain. Those Planet of the Apes looking girl Wookiees, I did not like those. No thank you. I like how much the final showdown with Voss and Kira was just like the throne room scene in The Last Jedi. Like, Kira is literally standing there with a sword about to kill Han. Voss is like, yes, you didn't see this coming, but I know Kira. I see her mind. I see now as she turns her sword thing and kills her true enemy. My biggest laugh in the movie is when Kira's like, we're gonna have to get enough money to make a life for ourselves. And then it cuts away to this table that is full of heretofore unseen, giant, generic-looking earth diamonds. Just piles of big diamonds. They're like those paperweights you can get at the mall. You know, riches. I also like that Kira is saying that to distract Han and like get him to go away and go get Beckett. And she's like, you catch up to him. I'm just gonna put these diamonds like in a bag, which will take me 20 minutes. I actually don't know why she left Han behind either. Like, she pinned it all on Beckett, so his name is clear. She still cares about him. I mean, it seems like the only reason she didn't wait for him is that she thinks his big flaw is he's too dumb and loyal and sweet. But like, she's in charge now, and I think those are pretty good traits in a trophy husband. He doesn't have to be involved in your business, Kira. Just leave him on the ship. Or if Darth Maul asks, be like, yeah, it's my boyfriend. What of it? A great twist that would have totally explained this is if after she gets Han to leave, the Mandalorian armor that's standing in the corner of the room like on display suddenly moves and it's Boba Fett and he's been here the whole time and he and Kira passionately kiss. Now that is how you set up a Boba Fett movie. I will admit that I was excited to see Darth Maul, but I think it's kind of because my eyes were just glazed over by that point in the movie and it was like a shot in the arm, like, oh, a thing happened. He did look a little uncanny valley with the voiceover thing. Like, I love Ray Park and I love Sam Witwer, but I think that one cannot have both. Enfys Nest takes the helmet off and it's like a big reveal, and it's treated so much like a reveal that I was like, is that like Woody Harrelson's daughter with Tandy Newton that we didn't know about? And then I was like, no, I guess the reveal is just that it's a child. And then I realized it was an adult woman with youthful features, and I was like, oh, I guess the twist is just that it's a girl. When is a fighter being revealed to be a girl going to stop being treated like an adequate twist? I mean, the fighter being a girl was a twist when Metroid did it in 1986. Is that really a thing we can play straight anymore? I mean, in this particular universe, it's not even that unusual for girls to fight. It seems pretty equal opportunity. I also thought it was lame that Han helps specifically a rebellion right here in the prequel movie. Like, I thought that was a growth moment for him in the original trilogy, but apparently it's just a thing that he's done before. Number 2, the characters. Okay, here's the thing. One of the first things everybody started asking me was like, how were the performances in the movie? Probably because Lucasfilm, aware that the production was troubled and that they were getting a lot of bad press, decided to throw Aldrin Ehrenreich They decided to throw him under the bus and leak the news that he needed acting lessons, which, by the way, I would call unforgivably cruel. The thing is that asking me how the acting was in this movie is like asking me how the acting was when I've just seen a high school production of Seussical the Musical. Like, well, I couldn't really tell you. It's not really that kind of production, friend. I don't think there's a single actor in this that I haven't seen and liked in something else, so I know they all can act for what it's worth. Nobody did a bad job, but Aldrin Anglerfish didn't have a single thing to do, so how am I to know? Han Solo was physically present in practically every scene, but he spent the whole time standing around, looking like he didn't understand what was going on and grinning like an idiot. And he sounds so much like Christian Slater, but I think that's just the guy's voice. Han Solo's character development happens in the original trilogy. Like, he's this tough guy who doesn't have very good morals and likes to act like he's only out for himself, but he secretly has a heart of gold, and he learns to care about his friends and the rebellion and become like a hero. So I figured Han in a prequel could go one of two ways. One, he starts out nice and bright-eyed and wants to help everyone and then ends up bitter and jaded. Or two, he starts out jaded and not wanting to help anyone and then learns to be nice. Neither is ideal, because one is just kind of predictable and boring, and the other one is like an echo of his other arc in the original trilogy and kind of dampens the impact of that. Instead, though, the movie just does neither of those, which, like, kudos for surprising me, I guess, but the reason that surprises me is because I thought they wouldn't do it because it would be very boring and strange to do. Han just starts the movie one way and then ends the movie the same way. Like, he's a con man who's out for himself, but he's also loyal to the people he cares about, which is pretty middle of the road. I would say he demonstrates by shooting Woody Harrelson that he's learned not to trust, but he's still, like, smiley and wants to be best friends with Chewie, so it seems like it didn't get him down too much. I guess the lesson Han learns is just don't trust people who have already actively betrayed you multiple times, which, congratulations, Han. The two performances I specifically enjoyed were Paul Bettany and Donald Glover. Paul Bettany's just really fun to watch as a bad guy. He's like some kind of evil Gordon Ramsay, and he's definitely giving it like 110%. But there's just absolutely nothing to his character. Donald Glover was doing such a good impression of OG Lando, which was really fun to watch. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of Lando in this story. Like, he didn't have an opportunity to show a lot of range, so it really was just an impression, which isn't Donald Glover's fault. I mean, at least he seemed like he was having a lot of fun with it, making strong choices, and doing a distinctive character, so he was my favorite. Val and Rio, whose names I had to look up, were not characters. They didn't do anything. They die, like, immediately. Oh, and, by the way, Rio and Beckett both do the same, like, hilariously bad death acting. It was so weird. Come here, Skippy. Skippy is going to help me demonstrate a death scene, as seen in Solo. So, as you can see, I'm like cradling him as he lays dying. Are you crying yet? And Skippy goes, ugh. And that's it. Like, they both just sighed and shrugged their heads back. I call that the whatever death. Like, you're just kind of fed up with being alive. Anakin's mom did it too. The only character with a consistent personality and through line was Kira. I mean, in the case of Emilia Clarke and Woody Harrelson, it was just kind of like showing up and doing the thing that you always do. But I thought Kira as a character worked okay. Not all of her decisions fully made sense, but I think functionally she was supposed to be Han's character foil, which is good, because she'll basically compromise her morals and just align herself with the most powerful person in her immediate surroundings to survive, which Han won't do, so that worked for me. Number 3, the scrubbing the story clean of nearly every joke. This movie started out being made as a comedy, and then the reshoots, I thought, were intended to make it like still a comedy, but toned down. But then you watch it and you find out that the reshoots were actually intended to make it like a drama with occasional jokes. I wouldn't call this end result a comedy any more than I would call like Rogue One a comedy. It's an action movie with a handful of jokes, but the jokes are the exception and not the rule. Which is bizarre because I feel like the story just on its own merits doesn't really offer anything interesting. But you wouldn't really need a great story if it was like a fun comedy romp, because comedies are like all journey and no destination. I can't claim to know what the original cut of the movie was like, but there were a few points that really stood out to me as like elements that were set up and then dropped or abandoned, or felt like half of a joke which was then cut because maybe it became too funny and didn't mesh with the tone. Like, this was the skeleton of a movie that would be filled with jokes, but the jokes just weren't there. And the jokes would be the muscles, or perhaps the veins. Whatever's more important. Probably both of them are pretty important. Han asks Chewie his name, and Chewie responds with like Wookiee noises, and then Han is like, Chewbacca, huh? And you're like, how? So that doesn't make sense, and a good comedy movie might like acknowledge that it doesn't make sense and use it as the setup for a funny joke. Actually, what I think would be funniest is if they're having this whole conversation, Chewbacca's making his Wookiee sounds, and then Han's like, what's your name? And Chewbacca is like, Chewbacca. And then like that's the only time he speaks English in all of canon. He only speaks Wookiee from then on, but that is how Han learned his name. I think it's funny when Chewie pulls the arms off that guard and then Han complains that that's the uniform that would have fit him and he can't use it as a disguise now. The obvious follow-up joke would be that the next time you see Han, he is wearing an outfit that just completely doesn't fit him. Like it's from a guard that's like a diminutive species of alien. Like a tight little uniform jacket and like the sleeves don't cover his arms and like his midriff is out. It's like a crop top and he just looks like an adult man in a child's Halloween costume. And like he walks out to the other guards and he's trying to act natural and they're just immediately like, we know that's not your uniform, and he has to fight his way out. And then the whole rest of the action sequence, like he's doing cool heroic stuff, they're like shooting guards, he's jumping over stuff, but it's all rendered comedic by the fact that he's in these ill-fitting, emasculating looking clothes. I also want to go back to L3. This is a big one for me. So L3 is a comedic character. She and Lando bicker a lot, and there is a scene where L3 tells Kira that Lando has the hots for her, and Kira is like amused and taken aback by this. Then a few minutes later, L3 is injured and dies, and Lando like freaks out and he runs to her and dramatic music plays. Lando gets shot in the arm. Han is like looking on in sympathy, and just tonally it makes no sense. It's very weird. So here's my conspiracy theory about how it played out in the Lord and Miller version. I think L3 tells Kira that Lando has a crush on her, and Kira is like surprised and amused and thinks that L3 is just a delusional droid with a crush. The way I'm imagining it, Lando isn't like annoyed with L3, it's just a very like courteous working relationship like any pilot with his navigation droid. Like there's no real tension between them at all that you've seen. Then L3 gets shot and Lando reacts massively. Like he runs over to her, he's like weeping, it's beautiful. There's no dramatic music, it's just all Lando with his overwrought reaction. He like embraces her, he kisses her weird mouthless face passionately as if she's a human lover, and it's this beautiful operatic death. It turns out L3 actually was the love of his life, and while this is unfolding, it smash cuts to Han or Kira and they're reacting like they and the audience realize that they have completely misread this relationship. And then you can have Lando being like comedically, melodramatically broken and weepy until the point where they plug in L3's brain to the ship, because then it's like she's still alive, or it's what she would have wanted, or whatever, and then he can be his normal self again. Also, for the record, I don't like that L3 is like a lady-voiced robot with shapely hips and long legs. Like, imagine how much funnier that scene would play out if she was like basically a Dalek from Doctor Who, like just a big garbage can shaped robot with like big metal arms that like move like this, and like a synthesized voice, and it's like, Lando and I, we are in love. Anyway, here's what passes for a joke in this movie, and I wrote it down because I was aghast. Okay, so something crazy or dangerous occurs, and then the little monkey-armed alien goes, "You've never been to a Minoc roast on Ardinia. It's nuts. Waka waka." That is like the part of the movie where I started to go, oh no. Number 4, the outfits. The outfits were so boring. Half of the clothes were just stuff you could pick up at the mall. Like Kira's in like a bomber jacket and she has a bob. Then later her hairstyle is just like a ponytail with bangs, and she's wearing like little stud earrings. It's like, yay, we're in space. It's a space ponytail. She has the one good outfit that's like the leather collar thing with like the red cape that she changes into for their mission, and I imagine that's the one everyone's gonna cosplay as because it's like the only memorable one. And then after that, she changes into like a plain black jumpsuit that looks like she got it at Urban Outfitters. The bad guy Voss, he's just wearing like a suit, just like an Earth businessman suit. The shirt underneath is satiny, and one of the jacket sleeves is like oversized and billowy, kind of like a cape, and that's all we get. And then they go on their mission and they come back like at least a full day later and he's still wearing the same outfit. Like, I know the reshoot schedule was tight, but surely they had time to change Paul Bettany's clothes between shots. I mean, admittedly, sitting around in the same clothes as yesterday eating space caviar is like a big mood. The infantry that's fighting like World War I style in the trenches are wearing like modified stormtrooper armor that's supposed to look older and more Earth-like, I guess. And like it doesn't protect the soldiers as well, so what's the point of that? Because The Empire never seemed like they were financially strapped to get those stormtrooper costumes. Like, we've seen a lot of them before. Lando's wardrobe was fun to look at and it had fun colors, but it did kind of bum me out that it was just capes. Like, I've never gotten the impression before that Lando only wears capes and he has a big closet that's full of capes. Like, Lando wore capes in the original trilogy, and I guess we can't make up anything new, so Lando has only worn capes his whole life and nothing else. I would think if Lando is like this zany personality and he loves fashion, that he would have an extremely varied wardrobe, and every outfit has some kind of zany quirk to it. Like, one has crazy sleeves and the other one is covered with sequins, not just like the same outfit in a broad spectrum of colors. But no, we don't have any thinking outside the box. And the box is the existing canon. Like, you can't use the canon to draw new exciting conclusions. You just have to do the same thing that we've seen. And by the way, why would Lando build like a bulky mechanical cheating at cards device to put inside his sleeve, which would then shoot out a card to cheat with, which is surely harder to conceal than just a single flat playing card that you could easily put in your sleeve? Apparently no one is checking up sleeves if he's got the device. I feel like he's overcomplicating it a lot more than he needs to. Oh, blame my inferior eyes and my failure to buy a visual dictionary if I'm wrong, but Kira's wearing this necklace and it looks like it's just like a silver necklace chain and then like a silver rectangle on a necklace. And then at the end of the movie, after the big adventure, you see Lando again. He's wearing his like Hawaiian shirt outfit and it looks like he's wearing the same necklace. Is there some kind of space significance to a rectangle? Or are they just really in fashion right now? Or is Lando wearing Kira's necklace and I missed something? Like, what does it mean? What's going on? Number 5, L3. L3 gets her own bullet point because, hot take, I hate L3. I hate that she's named Leet. I hate that we like never get girl droids, and when we do, she has to have like curvy woman hips and she has to stand like this, like a sassy woman does. And like nag people all the time. Here's the thing about L3 where you can really feel those rewrites happening. So they made L3 like a social justice warrior droid, and she shouts obvious things like droid rights. That's what she's doing. The very first moment we meet her, she's like talking to these recreational battle droids that are being fought to the death, like trying to appeal to them to rise up against their oppressors. She's trying to get a chant going. Anyway, okay, droid rights. And then they're stealing the coaxium and they're in like this control center, and she takes a restraining bolt off of a little droid at the console, and then she says very sarcastically, like, yeah, you're free, okay, get out of my way, go start a revolution or something. It's very sarcastic and very dismissive, like she's just trying to get this droid to get away from the console. But then the little droid that she freed does do that, it does start a revolution, and then L3 calls Lando over the comm device, and she's like, I found my calling as like a liberator of droids. The rewritey part is when you're like, wait, what does that mean? Because that's been her goal the whole time, and why was she so sarcastic about freeing the droid when that's something she really earnestly wants to do? Why was she like a weird jerk to the little droid and just acting like she wanted him to get out of the way? So here are 2 ways that could have played out and like made sense. Number 1, she gives a passionate speech to the droid, earnestly trying to urge him to break free. We've seen her do this before and it's never worked before. The droid that she's talking to looks like it's just like an idiot. It's like she's talking to a toaster. Like, it just has this big vacant eye. It doesn't look like it's processing anything she's saying. The character she's with like rolls their eyes and it cuts away to some action somewhere else. Then later in the action scene, things could be like going south for the heroes, like, oh no, how do we get out of this one? And then suddenly all these little droids charge in, and the joke is like, surprise, all these apathetic, stupid looking astromech droids actually did start a revolution. Like, oh my god, it worked. One of them that looks like a vacuum cleaner could like roll in carrying a little makeshift droid flag that looks super like inept, like a kid made it, and it's like a tiny baby droid Les Miserables or something. It's a fun callback joke and a good triumphant moment for the good guys, and it's also funny because the droids are like cute and silly looking, and it would be a satisfying comedic payoff to how dismissive all the other characters have been of L3 up until that point, instead of it just being like all her friends were jerks to her and then she died. Okay, way number 2, L3 isn't droid rights robot. She's just kind of blasé coy and snarky, and the droid rights thing is literally never mentioned. Or maybe they could even give her a line about how, like, her relationship with Lando is special because she's smarter than all those other stupid droids. Then the way she does in the movie, she sarcastically tells the little droid to go start a revolution. She just wants him out of the way, but then he goes and he does that. Then when she calls Lando and she's like, "I've found my calling," it's funny because it's like the first time we've seen her get excited about anything. And we, the audience, feel it with Lando when he seems irritated because it's like, really, this is like the worst time that this could happen? It's weird that in some scenes L3 is all like droid rights, and then in other ones like seems not to care and acts completely different. It's almost like this whole element of L3's personality was added in the reshoots and never successfully rounded out or integrated into the story. But that's ridiculous. It's not like in the scene where they established this for the first time. There are like battle droids that are there in some shots and not in others, and sometimes they'll cut to two characters conversing and there's like an orange glow, so there's no background behind them and they didn't have to put them back on the set. And Clint Howard is there. So anyway, L3 dies and Lando is like really upset about it, and it's played as a super dramatic moment. But that's confusing because Lando always just seemed really annoyed with her, and you never really saw them getting along. And she never did anything right, and she was kind of rude to him and everybody else. It also was a little ghoulish that they did play L3's death completely straight, because then in the very next scene, Lando is making like little quippy, sarcastic remarks directly to L3's dead body. Number 6, explaining things that nobody needed or wanted explained, and then also the explanations are not interesting. The Millennium Falcon has a weird shape, which is what makes it an iconic looking spaceship design. And I swear at some point I read an expanded universe thing that like it's a freighter, so it's like a space forklift. And the reason it's got that notch taken out of it and the little prongs in the front is they're gonna push the crates with the little prongs. It doesn't really make sense, because why couldn't it just be like a stick, like a nose? Why wouldn't that get the same job done in the same way? But anyway, in Solo it's revealed that originally it had an escape pod, so the reason it looks like there's a rectangle missing is that there's literally a rectangle missing. This takes me back to the tone thing, because if this was in the context of like a goofy Lord and Miller comedy, it would kind of be like, haha, you thought it was an iconic spaceship design and it's just missing a piece. But like it's framed like that's supposed to be this huge revelation, like it's a dramatic moment. You're gonna be like, oh my god, mind blown. I didn't even realize that Han Solo had one specific blaster he used his entire life that had emotional significance to him. I kind of just thought it was like a common model of blaster that he like bought at a store somewhere. Like it's iconic to fans because it's like a space thing that we don't see every day, but I kind of thought within the Star Wars universe that it was just like a basic handgun. But the Solo movie gives us an explanation about how Han Solo got his special blaster, and the backstory is just that Woody Harrelson was like, here, have this blaster. Chewbacca wears that bandolier, and I always just figured it was like a personal preference he developed over time, and I assumed the things on it were like bowcaster bolts for his weapon of choice. I was never like, how did he get that bandolier? But no, Chewbacca also gets the bandolier in this movie, and the backstory of the bandolier is that Woody Harrelson's team was like, here, have this bandolier. I guess he liked it so much that he wore it for the rest of his life. There's this bit of Star Wars lore that the Millennium Falcon is like a temperamental ship to fly because its computer is comprised of 3 different droid brains and they argue with each other sometimes. I always figured that that was meant to like sum up the nature of the maintenance the ship has seen over the years, and the fact that it's like a hack job and repurposed parts, probably a lot of paper clips holding it together. So I was never like, which droid's brains? That's got to have emotional significance, because I always just kind of figured that Han like over time pulled different droid brains out of garbage piles because he's cheap and he needed to fill in gaps in the system. But no, it's L3's brain, so that gets a backstory too. And maybe we'll see the other 2 droid brains in the next 2 installments of the Solo trilogy. I didn't need it explained to me in a prequel how Han ended up calling Chewbacca Chewie, because I just kind of like have lived in the world before, and I understand that if you know someone a while, you might start calling them by a nickname, but the movie had to show Han declaring that he's going to give Chewbacca a nickname. I guess Enfys Nest is supposed to be the leader of like a smaller pre-rebellion that possibly leads to the later proper rebellion? I never felt I needed an explanation of how the rebellion came to be. Like, you know their mission, so what does it matter? Are we gonna get a prequel about a second, even smaller pre-rebellion that inspired Enfys Nest to start her pre-rebellion? I mean, I'm not really kidding. We're probably gonna get a book about that. Number 7, wasting time. I don't mean by this bullet point that the movie was a waste of time. I mean, that's also true, but it wasn't what I mean. But I am saying that within the runtime of this movie, a lot is wasted on pointless stuff. This movie tries to cover so much ground. We have Han's youth on a corrupt planet, car chase action sequence, Han in the army escape action sequence, a train heist action sequence, negotiating with Voss, negotiating with Lando, a hyperfuel stealing action sequence, a space monster action sequence, then a final confrontation with Voss, a Voss fight action sequence, and then a gun standoff with Beckett. There's a whole lot of stuff here. I don't need most of it, and I like even less of it. If it's a prequel and we know where ultimately Han and Lando and Chewie are going to end up, the drama within the story needs to be more character driven. But we're just not given enough time within the story for the characters to play off each other and have their relationships matter to us. The best explained relationship is Han and Kira, and I feel like that was setting up some interesting groundwork for an eventual sequel, but there just wasn't enough between them in this movie to justify the time spent on it. Even that relationship is told more than it's shown. Like, they talk for 1 second and then it's a car chase. And then when they reunite, like, their reactions aren't even excited enough given the circumstances. Like, this was Han's whole driving motivation for 3 years. He thought she was possibly dead. And then they see each other, they like hug tightly, and then they just relax back into reserved conversation. It's like, I've been more excited to run into old classmates at the grocery store. Han and Lando's like frenemies thing was kind of poorly defined, and they had more time interacting with other characters than each other. And Han and Beckett had even less bonding time, which totally undermined what I thought could have been a really good last standoff scene. So like, why didn't they just borrow some time from all those action sequences and all the time wasty stuff to just flesh out these relationships a little more and make it good? By the way, all of our time with Val and Rio, I'm counting as wasted time because then they died and they never mattered again. The most egregious action sequence is the space monster escape scene when they're coming back with the hyperfuel, and it's like such an obvious sci-fi concept. It felt very familiar, not particularly engaging, and like loads of lighthearted family adventure movies have these mid-story action scenes that are just filler and that I skip when I rewatch them. I mean, the Rathtar scene in The Force Awakens is like a golden example of this. I thought that scene was so boring that I would use it to refill my popcorn when I rewatched the movie in theaters for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th times. I kind of just feel like scenes like this are usually mandated by the studio, like they don't want a certain amount of time to elapse without some kind of action sequence to keep the energy up or something. They usually happen in like the first third, and the minuscule impact they have on the plot is that at least they give your new team of characters an opportunity to bond and work together in this kind of environment. Oh, this also applies to that scene in Moana with the coconut men. But the space monster thing in Solo is like weirdly close to the end of the movie. The characters have already bonded as much as they're going to, which is not much. As an audience, you're aware that the characters are on their way to the final confrontation with the bad guy, which is going to actually matter, and this scene is like a bizarre de-escalation from the previous action scene, which just happened, in which one of the major characters died. As a story beat, this makes no sense, and it's where you're like really feeling the runtime dragging. But I know exactly why it's in here. It's because Han Solo doing the Kessel Run is a story in the original series, and this movie they decided they had to show the Kessel Run, but they didn't have anything interesting to happen on the Kessel Run. The interesting stuff actually all happened right before that, so they just threw in a space monster. Number 8, Solo is a triumph for diversity, and it is fabulous. I am living. There was a lot of talk about how this movie is great because of its diverse casting, but I didn't think that the writing of the characters in question was particularly groundbreaking or even kind. I don't know how #woke it is that there's a tribe of literal exploited natives and black people who look just like Native Americans on Earth, and have an in-story reason that they can't speak and don't have any lines because they decided to write it so that their tongues were cut out, and they need Han Solo to help them. Tandy Newton is a black woman with a major on-screen role in a Star Wars movie, and she was super excited about it. She even at one of the premieres wore like a dress with images of other black Star Wars characters' action figures on it. It was really cute, and she seemed so excited, and her excitement was so like infectious, and you just wanted to be happy for her. So I was kind of disappointed to see her character had like 5 lines and no real personality and didn't matter in the plot at all, and then died and wasn't mentioned again. Our other black character, Lando, owns L3, who is a slave and keeps saying that she's upset that she's a slave, and Lando makes fun of her. I just don't know if that counts as great representation. Oh, and in an interview, Lawrence Kasdan's son said that Lando is pansexual, which makes him a fabulous queer icon. OMG, except that this all happened after the movie was already made, and it's not actually textually supported, and it's kind of like he just made it up in an interview because it would get clicks. It's like gay Dumbledore. It's like if Lawrence Kasdan's son said in an interview that even though Emilia Clarke is a white actress, when he wrote Kira, he knew that she was mixed race. And it's not mentioned in the movie, but it is canon that Kira is mixed race. He knows it to be true. There is a scene in the movie where Lando and Han are like just talking to each other normally, and then L3 sarcastically says, "Stop flirting," in order to be rude to them. Like she's making fun of them or something. Maybe that makes Lando pansexual. And I guess Lando is pansexual for having sex with a robot that's not male or female, even though it is a female robot with a woman's voice and feminine curves. I'm just saying that if that robot who's played by a woman is supposed to be understood by the audience as anything but a woman, and that makes Lando pansexual, then why didn't you just make it C-3PO? What are you afraid of, Kasdans? Lando also seems to have had sex with Kira, but that doesn't mean anything because every man Kira interacts with seems to have had sex with Kira, and they always have at least one line hinting at it. Thanks, I love it. I guess there was no insinuation that she's had sex with Darth Maul, but I assume they're saving that for the sequel. Number 9, the sequel. Did any of you guys see the remake of The Mummy that came out last year? Probably not. It was supposed to launch Universal's Dark Universe franchise before they canceled it in shame. See, I always figured that the best way to launch a cinematic universe was like to make a really solid first movie that stood on its own and that people liked, and then those people would be like, "Can you please make a sequel?" And you would be like, "Sure, I can, but what do I know?" Instead, in The Mummy, they just crowded out all of the character stuff, all of the story stuff in what was already a pretty sloppy and weak story in order to just shove in as much groundwork as possible for this cinematic universe. It's gonna be big, you guys. There's an entire bizarre interlude where the characters go to Dr. Jekyll's laboratory where he has all these different samples hinting at the other monsters that are going to be brought in for his monster Avengers. Like he has the creature from the Black Lagoon's webbed fingers in a jar, and Igor's shirt, and it's tailored so it would fit around a hunch. I'm making all of these up, I don't actually remember. My point is that Solo reminded me so much of The Mummy 2017. They put in the thing with Enfys Nest, but then don't really explore those characters. They don't resolve the plot with Kira. They have Darth Maul for a sequel tease. And I've heard people say that the reason Darth Maul was in it is that it's not teasing a Solo sequel, it's teasing like the Boba Fett movie or the Obi-Wan movie or something. And the reason that's not true is then why would they keep Kira and have Kira working with Maul? Kira's only interesting as far as she relates to Han. He's the one she has a relationship with. Like, if Kira pops up in an Obi-Wan movie, are you gonna be like, oh boy, I can't wait to see how Kira and Obi-Wan play off each other? Like, no, it only works if they're doing another Solo. So I think wasting time setting up all this stuff instead of strengthening the story that you're working on right now is really putting the cart before the horse. Or, I guess, putting the Arduba sand skiff before the Ronto. Does that make that sentence I said a joke because I put silly Star Wars words in it? Because when the monkey did that, it made it a joke. It was a pretty dead crowd. And when he said that line, one man in the audience, like way down in front of me, went, Number 10, what's with all the slaves? Do you know what I'm saying? This movie had a whole thread going through it about slaves and marginalized groups. and I'm not sure what they were going for with that. Lady Proxima at the beginning, she basically enslaves orphans and runaways by like forcing them into a life of crime in order to get like just enough to survive. It's this weird Oliver Twist-esque operation, and she's a gross slime monster. She's depicted as unambiguously evil. Han demonstrates to us that he's not a good fit for the army because he remarks to his commanding officer that actually the Empire are the savages because they've come onto somebody else's homeworld and are attacking them. I got thrown out of the academy for being too woke. That tribe that Enfys Nest is helping is like a bunch of abused and exploited natives whose lands have been ravaged by people trying to take all their resources. We are meant to sympathize with the tribe, and even Han is won over to their cause. Even Kira isn't a free agent. They have that line about how she's like indebted to Crimson Dawn and she couldn't leave even if she wanted to, and she's even got like a brand looking tattoo indicating that she's kind of owned by them. Then when they're showing up to the mining colony, Lando has that terrible line that sounds like it was added after the fact, where he just says like really unenthusiastically, mining colonies are the worst. But anyway, the use of slaves to mine hyperfuels depicted as an evil practice. And Chewbacca's tribe/family are all slaves, which is framed as tragic. And then you have the droids. L3 is like a social justice droid, which doesn't work at all. Droids are like the house elves in Harry Potter. Like, if they're happy, they're like cute little pets and they just want to work for the humans. It's all good, it's fine. It's a little creepy because they have like human level intelligence and they can talk and have personalities and stuff, but it's fine. They're robots, it's okay. If even one of them starts to express that they don't like that they're slaves and they feel like they're second-class citizens and that makes them unhappy, you basically have to confront the fact that all of your favorite Star Wars characters are complicit in the ownership of slaves. So if L3's activism is played straight, that's weird and bad because of the implications it has for other Star Wars stories. But instead, L3's activism is supposed to be a thing that you mock, which is even more weird and bad. Firstly, because she seems like a straw man that you're supposed to use to, by proxy, make fun of maybe groups in the real world that want equal rights. So that's great for your family picture. But it's even weirder because if L3 has free will and doesn't like being owned, then yeah, you should want to empathize with her. Like, it's not an insignificant issue. She is actually a slave. Lando owns her. He isn't nice to her. He mentions that he wishes he could wipe her memory and delete her personality. And he also apparently has sex with her, which, when paired with the slavery angle, feels not awesome. L3 complains that businesses won't serve her and that they're fighting creatures like her to the death for entertainment. And our main characters huff and roll their eyes. She starts a droid revolution. It's a comedic moment and an inconvenience to the crew. And her writing is so bad. At one point, Lando's like, "Do you need anything?" And she's like, equal rights? Waka waka. This would be a weird incidental joke in any movie, but it's even weirder in a movie that has the wrongness of slavery as a recurring idea throughout. Like, what are they trying to do? It's almost like this script was written thoughtlessly, like in a patchwork fashion with multiple creators, and then wasn't edited competently before it was made into a movie and put in theaters. Oh, and by the way, we're supposed to think this is really sweet, that L3's brain is put in the Millennium Falcon so she can live on forever. I don't know, is it a beautiful fate for L3, who hated being owned and not having any agency, that her brain is now permanently trapped in a ship which other people drive around, unable to speak forever? I have no mouth, and I must beep boop. Number 11, the stuff that was good. I just held up 9 fingers like I thought it was the number 11. I liked when Beckett says that Dryden Voss is going to be super mad at him and kill him, and Han says they're going to go talk to him together. It was just like a sweet loyalty moment. It was a good establishing thing for Han's character. I'm here for these moments of friendship. They make me feel very happy. Although it was weird that it was followed by Beckett being like, he doesn't know who you are, you don't have to go with me, because it was just kind of really obviously spelling out what had already been made really clear in the whole conversation prior to the beat about Han saying he would go to. I guess Lawrence Kasdan and his son were worried that I wouldn't understand. There were like 4 good jokes, which I assume were holdovers from the Lord and Miller version. When Han's in the spaceport and he looks over at the Imperial recruitment ad, you can hear under the announcer's voice like a little tinny recording of the Imperial March, and I thought that was funny. Although if the movie is not a screwball comedy and is like a drama that's canon in Star Wars, that becomes really weird. Like, imagine if that happened in The Force Awakens. You'd be like, what? I liked the scene where Kira and L3 talk to each other, just taken on its own. It's a funny scene. I liked the one line from Han when he said he learned a maneuver from a pilot before he crashed and died doing this. It's a funny line. Oh, there's a part where Kira puts her hand on Han's shoulder, and it's like a show of support from her, but visually it echoed a part in Voss's office when Voss puts a hand on Kira's shoulder, and when he does it, it's like him being overbearing and it's sinister, and I wondered if it was foreshadowing that Kira can't be trusted and she's gonna take Voss's job, and it probably wasn't, but if it was, that's kind of cool. I liked the use of Han shot first. I thought that was the only like pandery bit that felt really natural within the story, and it was a good dramatic beat. I liked the droids in the droid revolution scene. I thought they were very cute designs. Okay, that's it. Number 12, he's named Solo because he's alone. This interaction is so hilarious and how badly it plays out. So Han runs up to the recruitment counter, acting kind of shifty, but trying to sign up and get off the planet and draw as little attention to himself as possible so he doesn't get killed by thugs. The recruiter tells Han that most recruits end up in the infantry, and then Han, for whatever reason, decides to arrogantly tell the recruiter that no, he's gonna be the best pilot in the whole galaxy, which is an odd thing to declare to someone when you're trying to fly under the radar and there are thugs right behind you looking for you. I mean, he said that so that line could be in the trailer. The recruiter asks for Han's name. Han, for some reason, tells him his real name, and then the recruiter asks, Han what? Instead of making up a name, Han stares blankly, which prompts the recruiter to ask, who are your people? I appreciate that he worded this question as unnaturally as possible so it can be a super on-the-nose question about Han's identity. Han says that he has no people and apparently is unwilling to make up a last name because showing up to the counter with no papers and no last name is the best way to avoid being arrested. So the recruiter shrugs and goes, Han Solo. Han Solo, do you get it? He's named Han Solo because he's alone. Solo means alone, and canonically it has meant that he was alone this whole time. How many other people passed through that gate and got named Solo? Or some other cruel name relating to their personal baggage? Why would that even be the first word that guy thought of? Why not Han Doe? Or Han Smith? Han alone? Han by himself? Han not applicable? Jimmy Scrambles. And Han just decided to keep that name forever and never change it? If your name is not even your real name and it just means that you're alone, aren't you morally obligated to change it when you get married and start a family? And Ben Solo, you mean to tell me that Ben Solo took his father's last name? His mother is a princess and he inherited his father's last name, Solo, which is not even a real last name and just got made up by some guy at the airport and never changed. I just thought in the world of Star Wars that it was understood that people are named things, like sometimes they're named nouns, and that's just normal in this world. If Han Solo's character name is supposed to be literal, and that's something that characters in this universe are capable of recognizing, who promoted General Grievous? This Grievous guy, he's a good candidate. Why wasn't Darth Vader like, oh, you're naming me the German word for father? That's a bit cruel, actually. Because you just told me that my wife and babies died. That's true, isn't it? That thing that you just told me? Why would you name me father? What does that mean? This entire scene feels like a scene that somebody would make up as a joke to make fun of the idea of making a Han Solo movie. Like if somebody was trying to think of the stupidest, tackiest thing that a Han Solo prequel movie could ever burden us with, they would be like, what if we find out that he's called Solo because he always works solo? And this is exactly what I mean about explaining things that do not need to be explained. How did Han get his name? A guy gave it to him. How did Han get his blaster? A guy gave it to him. How did Han meet Chewie? A guy gave Han to Chewie. The only thing that Han had any agency over was winning the Millennium Falcon in a bet which happened at the very end, and which we already knew about and played out exactly the way you would have expected. As for all of Han's other origin stories, it kind of seems like the only reason we didn't know them before is that they weren't interesting enough to bear repeating. This movie doesn't add anything new, meaningful, or interesting to Star Wars, which wouldn't be a problem if it was just like a fun comedy romp, but it's not that either. It's not funny, but it never gets into any interesting drama. It's boring to look at, and it's too long. It's just not worth seeing at all. Like, if you're curious, just wait till it's on Netflix in like 4 months. And I know Star Wars movies inevitably make money, but I hope it underperforms just enough that they don't waste resources on a sequel, and maybe they'll stop doing prequels and we'll like finally get a good anthology movie. So that was my list. And it wasn't actually a list of anything. If you make a really long YouTube video, it helps to put numbers in the middle to trick people into listening to you talk for a really long time. Did it work? Did it break up the monotony? Okay, if you haven't seen Solo yet, seriously, don't see it in theaters. Okay, bye! Thanks for watching, bye! There's that scene in Voss's office where Voss is like, I know your plan because my associate ratted you out. And Han is like, what? What? No, not Kira? What did she tell you? And Voss is like, no, not Kira, my other associate. And I wanted the doors to open and it's just CGI young Princess Leia from Rogue One and you're like, what? Other contenders. Jyn Erso, the ghosts of both Val and Rio, or a new character played by Harrison Ford.